I watched the color drain from my mother-in-law's face as she dropped her crystal wine glass, the red liquid splashing across her white lace tablecloth like a crime scene. On the 65-inch screen above the fireplace, her daughter, my wife, Sarah, wasn't exactly playing with the puppy we'd bought 2 months ago. She was on our living room rug, but she wasn't alone, and she definitely wasn't dressed for a casual afternoon at home. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand why I chose to destroy Sarah's world in front of her entire family on their 30th wedding anniversary, I need to take you back to where the first crack in our perfect life appeared. From the outside, Sarah and I were the couple everyone hated to love. We'd been married for 7 years, lived in a beautiful colonial in the suburbs of Connecticut, and spent our weekends hosting barbecues or hiking with our friends. I'm a structural engineer, a guy who appreciates stability and firm foundations. Sarah was a high-level marketing director, the kind of woman who could command a room with just a smile. Our friends called us the anchors. We were the ones people came to for relationship advice. We had a Sunday routine: coffee at the local bakery, a long walk, and then a home-cooked meal. It was predictable, it was safe, and I thought it was forever. The first crack showed up on a Tuesday in October. It was something small, something most people would overlook. Sarah came home late, claiming a meeting with a new client had run over. She smelled like a combination of expensive gin and a masculine woody cologne that I certainly didn't own. When I asked her how the meeting went, she didn't look me in the eye. She walked straight to the shower, her voice trailing off about demanding accounts and exhausting pitches. That should have been my first warning, but what came next was so much worse. A week later, Sarah suggested we get a puppy. She said she felt the house was too quiet and that a dog would bring us closer. We got Barnaby, a golden retriever puppy who was essentially a ball of chaos. To keep an eye on him while we were at work, Sarah insisted on buying one of those high-end dog cams, the kind that tosses treats and has a two-way microphone. She was the one who set it up. She told me she'd placed it in the living room, specifically angled toward Barnaby's crate. "It's for my peace of mind, Mark," she told me, kissing my cheek. "I can check on him from my phone during my lunch break. Don't worry about the settings. I've got it all synced to my private cloud account." I didn't think twice about it. Why would I? I trusted her implicitly. But then the late nights at the office started happening 3 times a week. Sarah became hyper-protective of her phone, taking it into the bathroom even when she was just brushing her teeth. If that was all I found, maybe I could have let it go, or convinced myself I was being paranoid. But then I noticed the dog cam was being moved. Every morning before I left for my firm, the camera was pointed at the crate. But twice, when I came home early to surprise her with takeout, I noticed the camera lens had been tilted upward, angled to cover the entire open floor plan living room and the sofa. When I asked Sarah about it, she laughed it off. "Oh, Barnaby probably bumped the table while he was playing," she said. But Barnaby was only 10 pounds. He couldn't reach the top of that mahogany side table. That's when the sick feeling started. That cold, heavy weight in the pit of your stomach that tells you your life is a lie before your brain is ready to admit it. I'm an engineer. I solve problems with data. So one afternoon while Sarah was at the gym, I decided to look at the camera. Sarah thought she was the only one with access because she'd set it up with her email. What she didn't realize was that I'm the one who managed our home's mesh Wi-Fi network. I could see every device connected to our hub.
I didn't just see the camera, I saw the backup storage. Sarah had been so arrogant, so sure of her own intelligence, that she'd linked the camera to our shared smart home ecosystem so she could voice command the treat tosser through our kitchen hub. She thought the privacy mode was active whenever I was home. She had no idea that because of a firmware update I'd pushed the week before, the privacy shield wasn't engaging properly. It was recording everything to a hidden folder on our local network drive. I sat in my home office, my hands shaking so hard I had to grip the edge of the desk. I opened the folder for the previous Thursday, a night Sarah said she was burning the midnight oil with her new junior partner, a guy named Julian. The footage wasn't blurry, it was high definition. I watched my wife walk into our living room at 3 p.m. with a man I recognized from her office holiday party, Julian. He was younger, fit, and wearing that same woody cologne I'd smelled weeks prior. They didn't even make it to the bedroom. They were on the rug right in front of Barnaby's crate. The dog was barking, confused, and Sarah just laughed, a sound I used to love, now sounding like glass shards in my ears. And that's when I realized this wasn't just a one-time thing. I scrolled back. It had been happening for months. My house, the place I worked 60 hours a week to pay for, was their playground. I felt a surge of cold rage, so intense I thought I might actually black out. I wanted to scream, to throw her clothes onto the lawn, to call her every name in the book. But then I remembered. Sarah's parents, Arthur and Joyce, were celebrating their 30th anniversary that coming Sunday. Arthur is a retired judge. Joyce is a deacon at their church. They idolized Sarah. They thought she was the golden child who could do no wrong. They'd always treated me like a son, often telling me how lucky I was to have married into such a principled family. I knew exactly what I was going to do, but I had to be patient. For the next 3 days, I was the perfect husband. I kissed her hello. I asked her how Julian was doing on the big account. I even listened to her complain about how tired she was from all the extra work. It was the hardest acting performance of my life. Every time she touched me, my skin crawled. Every time she smiled, I saw the footage of her on that rug. She had no idea that the dog cam she thought was her little secret was actually the weapon I was going to use to dismantle her life. Sunday arrived. We drove to her parents' sprawling estate in Greenwich. The whole family was there. Her brother and his wife, her cousins, and her parents' closest friends from the country club. About 20 people in total. The mood was celebratory. Champagne was flowing, and the smell of Joyce's famous prime rib filled the air. Sarah was glowing. She stood in the center of the living room, holding a glass of moat, telling everyone how blessed she was to have such a strong example of marriage in her parents. "Mark and I hope to be just like you in 25 years, she said, squeezing my arm. I looked down at her and forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Actually," I said, my voice projecting across the room, silencing the chatter, "I have a little surprise for everyone. Since we couldn't go on a big trip this year, I put together a tribute video for Arthur and Joyce. But first, I wanted to show everyone how well Barnaby is doing at home. Sarah's been so diligent about using the new puppy cam to keep an eye on him." Sarah's face went slightly pale, but she kept the smile plastered on. "Oh, Mark, we don't need to bore everyone with dog videos now." "Nonsense," Arthur broomed. "I want to see the little guy. Let's see what he gets up to when you're not looking."
I had already pre-configured the dog cam app on my phone to cast to their smart TV. It was a simple screen mirroring trick. I told everyone to look at the big screen above the mantel. "This is live," I lied. But I also saved a few highlights from the past week. I didn't click on the puppy footage. I clicked on the file from last Tuesday. The timestamp in the corner read 2:14 p.m. The room went silent. On the screen, the front door of our house opened. Sarah and Julian walked in. They weren't talking about marketing. Within 10 seconds, Julian had his hands all over her. Within 30 seconds, it was undeniable. The silence in that living room was deafening. It was the kind of silence that feels like it's pressing against your eardrums. I watched Sarah in my peripheral vision. The transformation was haunting. She didn't scream, she didn't move. The color didn't just leave her face. It was as if she'd turned into a statue made of ash. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her hand, still clutching the champagne glass, began to tremble so violently that the liquid was sloshing over the rim. Joyce was the first to react. She let out a choked, strangled gasp and dropped her glass. The sound of it shattering on the floor seemed to break the spell. "Mark?" Arthur's voice was a low, dangerous rumble. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the screen where his daughter was betraying every value he'd ever stood for. "What is this?" "This is the dog cam Sarah insisted on, Arthur," my voice sounding incredibly calm, even to my own ears. "She thought it was only for the puppy. She didn't realize it had a continuous record feature that synced to our home drive. I thought since we're celebrating 30 years of honesty and commitment today, we should all see how Sarah's been spending her afternoons." Julian's face was clear on the screen. Sarah's brother David stood up, his face turning a dark shade of purple. "Is that Julian? From your office?" Sarah finally found her voice, but it was a pathetic, high-pitched whimper. "Mark? Turn it off. Please. Mark! Stop it!" "Why?" I asked, tilting my head. "You looked like you were having so much fun. You told me you were at the office until 9 p.m. that night, but the camera says you and Julian didn't leave the house until 5:30. Where did you go after that, Sarah? To dinner? With my credit card?" She lunged for the remote on the coffee table, but David got to it first. He didn't turn it off.
He just paused the video on the most incriminating frame possible. The room exploded. Joyce started sobbing. Arthur stood up, his towering frame casting a shadow over Sarah, who had collapsed onto her knees on the Persian rug. She tried to grab her father's hand, but he pulled it away as if she were made of poison. "I didn't. It was a mistake," Sarah wailed, her eyes darting around the room, looking for an ally. There were none. Her cousins were looking at their feet. Her friends were staring at the floor in embarrassed silence. "A mistake?" I said, walking over to her. I felt a strange, cold clarity. "A mistake happens once, Sarah. This folder has 12 different dates in the last month alone. You brought him into our home. You did this while the dog we bought together was watching from his crate. You sat at this table tonight and talked about blessings while you were planning your next Tuesday afternoon with Julian." I looked at Arthur and Joyce. "I'm sorry to ruin your anniversary. Truly. You two have been more of a family to me than my own. But I couldn't let you keep believing the lie. I'm done." I didn't wait for a response. I didn't wait for Sarah to try and crawl after me with more excuses. I walked out of that house, the sound of Joyce's sobbing and Sarah's frantic pleading fading behind me. I drove home in total silence. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel broken. I felt light.
I spent the next 2 hours packing a bag. I took Barnaby. There was no way I was leaving him with her. I left my wedding ring on the mahogany side table, right next to the dog cam. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Sarah tried to fight for the house, but when my lawyer presented the dog cam archives during the deposition, her legal team realized that infidelity was a mild term for what she'd been doing. She lost the house, she lost her reputation at the firm. Turns out Julian was married too, and the company didn't take kindly to senior directors having affairs with subordinates on company time, and she lost her family's respect. Arthur hasn't spoken to her since that dinner. As for me, I've moved to a town 3 hours away. I have a new firm, a yard with plenty of room for Barnaby to run, and a house where the only cameras are for security, not for catching lies. People ask me if I regret the way I did it, the public spectacle, the destruction of her parents' anniversary. I just tell them the same thing. I didn't build the fire. I just finally turned on the lights so everyone could see what was burning. I'm not an anchor for anyone else anymore. I'm finally my own person, and for the first time in 7 years, the foundation I'm standing on is actually solid.